Mr. Moore, a successful businessman in his late 40s, had it all: a sprawling mansion, luxury cars, and a thriving company. Yet, despite his material wealth, he often found himself feeling restless and unfulfilled. He constantly compared himself to others, always wanting more, never satisfied with what he had. This dissatisfaction began to affect his personal life. His wife, Clara, and their two children, Sophie and James, noticed his increasing detachment. Family dinners were filled with silence, as Mr. Moore's mind was always elsewhere, fixated on his next big acquisition or business deal. Clara, worried about their growing emotional distance, suggested a family vacation to their country cottage, hoping it would help Mr. Moore reconnect with them and with himself. Reluctantly, Mr. Moore agreed, although he couldn't see how a simple cottage could offer him anything of value. The drive to the countryside was long, and Mr. Moore spent most of it on his phone, answering emails and taking business calls. When they finally arrived, the cottage seemed modest and unimpressive compared to their luxurious home. However, Clara and the children seemed delighted, their faces lighting up with joy at the sight of the familiar place. The first few days at the cottage were challenging for Mr. Moore. There was no internet connection, and the nearest town was miles away. He felt isolated and restless without the constant stimulation of his usual high-paced lifestyle. However, Clara had a plan. She encouraged the family to engage in simple, meaningful activities together: hiking, fishing, cooking meals from scratch, and stargazing at night. One afternoon, while exploring the nearby woods, Mr. Moore and his son James discovered an old treehouse. It was in disrepair, but James was excited by the prospect of fixing it up. Reluctantly, Mr. Moore agreed to help. As they worked side by side, hammering nails and sawing wood, he started to feel a sense of satisfaction he hadn't experienced in a long time. James's enthusiasm was infectious, and for the first time in months, Mr. Moore found himself genuinely enjoying the moment. Evenings at the cottage were filled with laughter and stories around the fireplace. Mr. Moore began to appreciate the simple pleasures of life: the taste of fresh, home-cooked meals, the warmth of a family game night, and the beauty of the natural world around him. Slowly, the constant yearning for more began to fade, replaced by a newfound appreciation for the present moment and the people he loved. One morning, Clara suggested they visit a local farmer's market. There, they met Mr. Thompson, an elderly farmer who had lived in the area all his life. Mr. Thompson radiated a sense of contentment and peace that intrigued Mr. Moore. They struck up a conversation, and Mr. Thompson shared stories of his simple yet fulfilling life, emphasizing the importance of appreciating what one has. "You know," Mr. Thompson said, "I've never had much in the way of money or possessions, but I've always felt rich because I value what I have: my land, my health, and the love of my family. Life's true wealth isn't measured in material things." These words resonated deeply with Mr. Moore. He realized that his relentless pursuit of more had blinded him to the treasures already in his life. Inspired by Mr. Thompson, Mr. Moore decided to spend more time learning about the land. He helped with the harvest, learned about sustainable farming practices, and even began to grow a small vegetable garden at the cottage. This hands-on experience brought him a sense of fulfillment and peace that he hadn't felt in years. As the days turned into weeks, Mr. Moore's outlook on life began to shift. He found joy in the simplicity of the countryside and the closeness of his family. His relationship with Clara and the children improved as they spent more quality time together. He started journaling, reflecting on his past actions and the changes he wanted to make in his life. Mr. Moore also began meditating, guided by Clara, who had practiced it for years. Meditation helped him clear his mind and focus on the present. He realized that his constant dissatisfaction stemmed from always looking outward for fulfillment instead of appreciating what he already had. One evening, as they watched the sunset together, Mr. Moore apologized to Clara for his neglect and promised to be more present and appreciative. Clara smiled and hugged him, knowing that his realization was a significant step towards a happier, more content life. Returning to the city was a bittersweet moment for Mr. Moore. The countryside had offered him clarity and peace, and the thought of plunging back into his hectic, materialistic routine filled him with a mix of apprehension and determination. He knew the real challenge lay in maintaining his newfound appreciation amidst the distractions and pressures of his old life. With a deep breath, he resolved to keep the changes and embrace a more mindful and grateful way of living. The first step in his transformation was to reassess his work commitments. Mr. Moore recognized that his constant drive for success had been a major source of his dissatisfaction. He decided to delegate more responsibilities to his capable team, trusting them to handle the day-to-day operations of the company. This decision not only lightened his workload, but also empowered his employees, fostering a more collaborative and balanced workplace environment. To further reinforce this shift, Mr. Moore implemented wellness programs at his company. He introduced flexible working hours, encouraged breaks, and organized regular team-building activities focused on health and well-being. He also set up a mindfulness room where employees could meditate or simply relax, drawing inspiration from the serenity he had found at the cottage. These changes were met with enthusiasm, and the positive impact on morale and productivity was evident. At home, Mr. Moore made a conscious effort to spend quality time with Clara and the children every day. He realized that the close bonds they had formed at the cottage were precious and needed nurturing. Family dinners became a sacred ritual, filled with laughter, stories, and genuine connection. They often reminisced about their time in the countryside, sharing their hopes and dreams and planning future visits. Mr. Moore's commitment to simplicity and appreciation also extended to his personal interests. He continued his gardening hobby, transforming a section of their city home's backyard into a green haven. It became a family project, with everyone pitching in to plant, tend, and harvest the vegetables and flowers. Clara introduced a variety of herbs, while Sophie and James delighted in planting their favorite fruits and vegetables. The garden served as a daily reminder of the lessons he had learned, the importance of nurturing what you have and finding joy in simple, everyday moments. As the garden flourished, so did Mr. Moore's sense of fulfillment. He found solace in the rhythmic tasks of gardening, from weeding and watering to harvesting and preparing meals with their homegrown produce. The act of working with his hands, cultivating life from the soil, brought him a profound sense of peace and connection to the natural world. He often spent hours in the garden with Clara and the children, cherishing these shared moments of growth and discovery. Mr. Moore's transformation became evident to those around him. He was more relaxed, more present, and genuinely happier. He no longer felt the need to compare himself to others or chase after material possessions. Instead, he focused on appreciating the blessings in his life, his family, his health, and the simple pleasures that brought him true contentment. One sunny afternoon, as the family enjoyed a picnic in their blossoming garden, Mr. Moore reflected on his journey. He remembered the restlessness and dissatisfaction that had once consumed him and felt a deep sense of gratitude for the wake-up call his grandmother had given him. It had been a long road, but he had learned that happiness and fulfillment come not from acquiring more, but from valuing and appreciating what you already have. Mr. Moore's story inspired many within his community. Friends, neighbors, and colleagues noticed the changes in him and sought his advice on how to lead more mindful and grateful lives. He began sharing his experiences through local talks and community events, spreading the message that true wealth lies in the richness of our relationships and the joy of living mindfully and gratefully. Years later, as Mr. Moore and his family returned to the country cottage for another summer retreat, he stood on the porch, looking out at the familiar landscape with a heart full of gratitude. The lessons of the past had become the foundation of his present, guiding him to a life of purpose, peace, and profound appreciation. He had found the true treasure in his life, not in the abundance of possessions, but in the richness of love, connection, and the simple beauty of the world around him.